Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz chess tournament in 2020. We are now in the day 4 of this very intense tournament, and 3 days of rapid games have been played. Now we have 2 days of blitz games, so 18 rounds of blitz, and it has been really an incredible tournament. I think in this blitz format everyone can beat everyone, even lower ranked players can surprise someone, and I still think it's an unclear who will win this, because Wesley So is playing very well. Hikaru Nakamura still can make it, although Hikaru lost also many games. Jan Nepomniachtchi also still can catch up with everyone, and at the end of the video I'm going to show you also the current standings. But today we'll analyze the game between Magnus Carlsen and Alexander Grischuk, which was really wild one, and Alexander Grischuk was the only player who won the rapid game against Magnus Carlsen. He mixed the tournament a little bit up because Magnus was playing really well, and he surprised, I think, Magnus. And what I like about Alexander Grischuk are, of course, his commentaries on Chess24. He gives really great comments when he analyzes the games. He gives really great insight. But what I remember that Alexander Grischuk once said about Magnus Carlsen: you can win maybe again a game against Magnus Carlsen, but you'll be never the favorite against Magnus Carlsen. And that's really true. You can maybe win a game, but I'm not sure if you would love to face Magnus Carlsen again, because he'll try to really smash you because of the loss if you have maybe won a game against him. I remember also Alireza Firouzja won this Chess Banter Blitz Cup against Magnus Carlsen. Then Magnus Carlsen was really attacking Alireza Firouzja in every of their games. So that's why I like to say don't mess with the GOAT. If you mess with the GOAT, then the GOAT will probably kick you back, and that's why, as I said, you can win maybe a game, but probably you're not gonna win the second one. So but before we analyze the game between Magnus Carlsen and Grischuk, I wanted to show you really an incredible position played here by Alireza Firouzja against Magnus Carlsen. It was really incredible. Here Alireza played in the last move queen to c3. So I just wanted to show you the ending. It was really wild game with wild tactics. Here's the move queen to c3. Magnus took. Bishop takes g4, which is a natural move. Of course, we want to give up really our bad bishop for this very active knight on g4. And here Alireza found really a great move. Pause the video, try to see now. Basically, it's a winning tactic. I'm not going to reveal also the result of the game, but here Alireza found really a great move. First of all, queen to c, rook to c7. After bishop to h3, of course, you can give one check, but no checks are possible anymore. And in the game, bishop takes c7 was played, and now rook takes c7. After king to h6, Alireza simply took, and here after rook takes e7, d6 happened. And here Magnus is really in troubles because he has to compete with his pawn with the rook, and it's really the worst when you have to place your rook in front of the pawn. But there is this Tarrasch rule, of course, which says we should always place our rook behind our enemy's pawns, but also behind our own pawns. If you want to maybe support your pawn, you should bring your rook behind the pawn in order to try to promote it. And here Alireza found really again a great tactic. He played bishop takes e5. After f takes e5, queen to e5. So here king to h7, and now Alireza sneaks in. But the most important thing is that Alireza has now 3 connected pass pawns. And here after the move rook to g8, Alireza connected them very well. You see, they're really dangerous. And now after rook to g7, king to g3, attacking the bishop, and Magnus played here now rook to f7. Again, pause the video and try to find now really the winning move for Alireza. And unfortunately for this prodigy Alireza, he didn't found it. He was really low on clock, and I'm sure he would have seen this move if he would really have more time on the clock, but he missed the tactic and he played queen to d8, escape with the queen. The best way here to proceed is simply take queen takes rook on f7, rook takes f7, and now king takes h3. Because the problem is now you cannot take the pawn. That's the funny part. If you try here to take the pawn on f5, we'll simply push the pawn on d4 further. We can play after something like rook to f8. We can simply play e6, and the king cannot catch up. We'll simply play here e7. the most important thing is that you get your 2 connected pass pawns here on the 6th rank. That happens if you don't have your king very near. The rook will simply lose against 2 connected pass pawns on this very high rank, on the 6th rank. So Alireza missed that tactic and he played queen to d8, and now Magnus took the pawn with bishop takes f5. And I'm not going to show you the whole game. The evaluation is now better for black, but as I said, here it was a clear winning chance for the young Iranian. So wanted to show you also another interesting game. It was Magnus Carlsen against Dominguez Perez Liner. Not that I want to really disrespect Magnus Carlsen. Also, many other players won games that they should lose. I really don't want to do that. Magnus is really playing very well in this tournament. He got also one loss because of the disconnection. So, as I said, I really don't want to disrespect him. But again, here really a tricky endgame. After the move bishop to f5, here Dominguez Perez Liner played the move g3, and basically this should be a draw. What Magnus has, of course, are the tactical problems here on the h-file, and here Magnus played a mistake. Rook to e2. He wants to get out of the dark squares because, for instance, if you take here h takes g3, then you get the discovered attack on the rook because your rook is on a dark square and you lose the rook. So that's why Magnus moved here the move rook to e2. The best way here to proceed is bishop to h3, simply getting into an endgame where we are pawn up, but it would be probably again a draw because these are opposite Carol bishops. So that's why in the game, after the move rook to e2, here Dominguez Perez Liner played bishop to f4, but it was a bad choice because the best move was, of course, rook to f8, and you lose simply here on the back rank. So bad mistake by both players. In the continuation after bishop to f4, Magnus won the game with really a great endgame technique. Bishop to g4, rook takes e5, and now c4, b takes c4, b takes c4, and now c5, rook takes c5, bishop to e5, and now here Magnus simply moved his king. Although this is a draw, but of course Dominguez Perez was also low on the clock here. Magnus was also low on the clock, but here the decisive mistake that Dominguez Perez Liner made, that he got a little bit out-tempoed, so sort of because Magnus played simply now very actively with his pieces, and now Magnus had the opportunity to move his king to f3. After the move bishop to d4, bishop to e5, it was a bad choice because Magnus can now push simply his pass pawn, and he deflected the king here from the defense of these 2 pawns and simply moved up here with the king here in between these pawns. And now very important move, king to a4, king to g7, and now c3, kicking away the bishop. That's the most important thing because we want to grab one of these pawns, create another pass pawn, and then the defense will be simply too stretched. You cannot protect both sides, and this was a losing game. Here, after move bishop to c1, Magnus even played a4. So if Dominguez Perez Liner attacks this pawn, we'll simply take this pawn. The same thing happened. Attacks this pawn, then we'll simply take this pawn, and again, it's a completely winning endgame here for white. So a little bit of luck, but as I said, Nepomniachtchi, Wesley So, Grischuk, every of these players have won games that they shouldn't. So it's simple as that. It's blitz, and we all make mistakes, of course, in blitz. So as I said, I didn't really want to disrespect Magnus, but that was what happened in the tournament. So let's check out now the game between Magnus Carlsen against Alexander Grischuk. Magnus Carlsen probably seeks for his revenge because he lost a very intense game in the rapid format against Alexander Grischuk. So now here Magnus opened with the move d4, knight to f6 played by Grischuk, knight to f3, d5, c4, and now after e6, knight to c3. So far we have the queen's gambit decline, and now after the move bishop to b4, the Ragozin variation. And I really like the Ragozin. It's really an active idea here by black, the pitting idea like the Nc3 Indian, but with this challenge in the center with the move d5. That's the main difference about the Ragozin and maybe the Nc3 Indian. So we have challenged white center, and now after the move c takes d5, which is really my suggestion if you have troubles to play against the Ragozin. undermine the pressure in the center. It's really important because the bishop is already creating some dangerous pins. So there are also some c5 possibilities. So there will probably happen further dynamics in the center. So that's why I really like this simplification line with the move c takes d5. So after e takes d5, we have bishop to f4. I myself, when I face the Ragozin, I play the bishop to g5 variation. It's more aggressive. Of course, Magnus Carlsen is the more pragmatic player, and he really loves to play the move bishop to f4. He played that against Alireza Firouzja. He played that move also, I believe, against Anish Giri. So it's a line that he feels comfortable. And now comes the main part of the Ragozin. It's of course the pinning idea. So knight to e4. You could protect this with queen to b3, but then you're maybe vulnerable to your opponent's attacks. In the game, rook to c1, which is the natural way here to proceed, and now knight to c6. In the Ragozin, you develop your pieces really on the most active squares. You see black has a good activity with the minor pieces, so far it's really the main line. So after knight to d2, that's also the main defensive strategy here by white, simply to challenge the knight on e4. If you take the knight here, it's not so good because then you face some tactical problems with queen to a4, knight takes e4, and then followed with d5. So these are really some nasty threats that you could face here. So it's the main line is again really an aggressive way. It's a move g5. I believe Anish Giri played that line also against Magnus Carlsen, and now bishop to e3. So knight takes c3. If you, for instance, try something else, if you try, for instance, to move f5 to support your knight further, it's not so good here for black because we simply have knight takes e4, and after potential d takes e4, d5 is the main tactic. Again, if the knight moves queen to a4, and you will grab the bishop. So here, if you, for instance, after remove knight to e4, f takes e4 happens, then I think white has solved the positional problems. We'll simply play g3, bishop to g2, castling, and follow with f3. That would be our main goal, to crack really the central pawn chain and really break the position. So in the game, after the move bishop to e3, so we saw the line after potential f5. It's not such a powerful idea. The position is about equal. Both sides have good chances here in the game. So knight takes c3. We have b takes c3, bishop to a3, rook to b1. There is now one problem here for black. Black has now the developing problems of this light square bishop. The light square bishop is a little bit stuck to the defense of the b7 pawn. We have f5, threatening, of course, f4, trapping the bishop, and now g3, preventing this idea. We have castling, played by Alexander Grischuk, which is also a normal idea of blacks, but now also with the positional threat to play the move f4 and maybe trap the bishop. So that's why f4, played by Magnus Carlsen himself, tracking again the space advantage that black has created here, and now queen to e7. Maybe even rook to e7 is an idea. Again, bishop to f2. What we want to do here from white's perspective, even after a potential queen to e7 or rook to e8 line, is to play e3, knight to f3, and then knight to e5. Magnus Carlsen won the game against Giri in a similar line, where he managed to create really powerful outpost on e5, and after potential knight to e5, f takes e5, we would have then a supported pass pawn, which could be a good strategical element of a potential endgame. So that's why the idea is clear here by white to simply build his attack around the e5 square. So in the game, after the move f4, queen to e7, as I said, not the move rook to e8, but it's a similar idea with an attack on the bishop on e3, bishop to f2. We have h takes g takes f4, and now Magnus Carlsen plays a very interesting idea, bishop to g2. He sacrificed the pawn. Even if you take f takes g3, it's not a problem. First, we will have this check, bishop takes d5, and if you try to cover here after bishop to e6, queen to e6, and now we will simply open the h file. That's now a serious threat. I really like now white's position, although it seems now that white's king is a little bit endangered, but our main strength now in this position is this central mobile pawn structure. c4, d5 is the threat, queen to b3 if the queen, for instance, moves, knight to f3, knight to g5. So still so many attacking possibilities. Even if you go after this pawn, you have grabbed the pawn, but it's nothing special. I think white has here good chances. We can even go after this pawn, and then maybe after this pawn. still we can include our knight into the attack, as I said. Even c4 d5 again is a possibility, so it's really a flexible attack here for white. So after the move bishop to g2, Grischuk decides to go bishop to d6. Now we have bishop to d5, king to h8, and now knight to f3, again with the same idea to activate this knight, maybe if the position allows it, again around this very nice square e5. So knight to d8, we have queen to d2, challenging now finally this pawn on f4. We have c6, and now bishop to b3. Magnus stays now on this very active diagonal. Maybe here in some occasions it's good choice here to trade off the bishops, but again d5 could happen with potential bishop to d4 ideas. That's also now a tactical threat. So you see the king is a little bit endangered here of blacks. We have advanced the pawn here with the move g5 and f5 too far, I think, in front of the king. So I think many players have lost, especially in these lines of the Ragozin, because of this vulnerable king on h8. So it's really tricky and wild opening. So as I said, if you're not tactically prepared so well, I think you should avoid it. But as I said, as a surprise in the beginning, I think the Ragozin could be good as a defensive defense against d4. So after the move knight to d8, queen to d2, we have c6, bishop to b3. So that's what's the game so far. Knight to e6, and now again the same idea, d5. C takes d, bishop to d5, and now after f takes g3, we have here h takes g3. Better idea instead of this f takes g3 is here to play rook to f6, but it's really hard to see because it's again an unnatural move. You're placing the rook where it could be attacked by the bishop, again on the same diagonal. But in the possible continuation, after potential g takes f4, bishop takes f4 is the possibility, and now queen to d3. We have to stay active with our queen, and now maybe there is at least some kind of a defense. We could escape with the bishop to h6 and follow with bishop to g7, regroup a little bit, but still this activity of white's piece is simply really, I think, too much to handle. Knight to e5, bishop to d4, rook to g1. Still, see, you still have these developing problems. The bishop cannot move. Rook to b7 is also a threat if you move the bishop. So again, too many attacking possibilities here for white, but at least I think this could be some kind of a defensive strategy. But in the game, after the move bishop to d5, Grischuk took f takes g3, and now we have h takes g3, and now also the h file is open. Again, I'm pointing out this bishop is stuck, cannot move. The rook is therefore also stuck here, it cannot also move. So basically it's like Grischuk is playing without two pieces, and it's simply too much against the world champion Magnus Carlsen, because here Grischuk tried f4. But again, we should always evaluate the position, how active our pieces are, not how many pieces we have on the board. So that's why, as I said, it's like Magnus is playing the game with two pieces up, and Grischuk opens the position further, which is suicide. We have g takes f4, that bishop to f4, and again, this idea, queen to d3. We have now clear target, it's pawn on h7. In the game, rook to f7, and now rook to b4. That's the move I really liked. That's really this so-called principle of the last piece that hasn't played so far in the attack. So it's really important principle to realize. I hope you realize this, all of these pieces, the queen, the bishop, the knight, the bishop even on f2 can be included in the attack. This rook is perfectly fine. So the only piece that needs improvement is really the rook. So that's why Magnus applies this very important principle, as I said, the last piece that hasn't participated in the attack, rook to b4. Now even with some tactical threats, rook to f4, bishop to d4. So too many attacking possibilities. Bishop to d6, rook to h4. You see the rook is changing the direction of the attack. We have now, we're continuing to push against this weak pawn on h7, king to g8, and now knight to d4. Magnus is simply removing further the defenders. You cannot take, of course, knight takes d4 is not an option because you get queen to h7. You cannot take with the rook. The rook is pinned. This is also some kind of a tactic that Magnus has prepared, of course. In the game, queen to f6 was played, and now after knight to e6, we have bishop to e6, now bishop to d4, bishop to e5, and now after the move, rook to h6 in this position. Grischuk resigned. Whatever you do, it's losing. You cannot play some more checks. You could try maybe queen to f4, but again, rook to g8, simply attacking king, king to f8, and now bishop to c5 is winning the game. So that was it. I will show you now the current standings after the first day of Blitz game. So let me see where I have prepared that. So Magnus Carlsen is on the first place with 12.5 points. Wesley So with 11.5 points. Pomiachi 10 points. Karu 10 points. Grischuk 9.5. Jeffrey Young is also good. Hare Krishna also 8 points. Levan Aronyan, fortunately for me, I really like this Grandmaster. Also not so good. Dominguez, Perez Liner, and Alireza Firouzja on the last place. But you see that Alireza had this winning game against Magnus Carlsen. So okay, maybe Alireza will finish on the last place, but still, I think he played a decent tournament because he surprised also the world champion. So it will be a tough day for everyone. So we will have now 9 more games of the Blitz, and I hope that will have some dynamics because still you see Wesley So has to make something happen if he wants to win this. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game and also this previous tactics here by Dominguez, Perez Liner, and by Alireza Firouzja. If you want to see more commented chess games of mine, check out my commented chess games series. And if you want to see the best chess games of all time, check out my best chess games of all time series. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.